Hey there, everyone. It's me, Noah. I'm a third-year medical student at Wake Forest School of Medicine, and welcome to tonight's town hall. So, as we've been talking about for a while, COVID has been causing a lot of disruptions throughout medical education, college, and really all of life in general. School and students are having to constantly adapt to rapidly changing guidelines and circumstances. And these changes have left students and institutions to adjust without much precedence or guidance of how to best do so. Tonight's virtual town hall is an opportunity for you guys as pre-medical students and medical school applicants to get to talk to medical school admissions deans. They're here to answer your questions, to help hopefully calm your fears, and to get you guys going on your journey to medical school. So before we begin, I'd like to introduce a friend of mine. She's been involved in YPI for about a couple years now. So everyone, please take a moment to recognize with me Christine. She's a second year at Emory School of Medicine.
Hi guys, like Noah said, my name is Christine Bethencourt and I am a second year medical student at Emory. A little background, I attended the University of Florida for undergrad. I double majored in biology and psychology, and then I took a year off in between college and med school. So I went back home to Miami, Florida, and I scribed for a year, and then I started Emory. So like I said, one of my most rewarding experiences so far at Emory has actually been through joining YPI, which I became a part of during my first year of medical school. And what I really loved about it was their mission to connect high school and college age students who are really seeking this kind of guidance for a career in medicine. And then it kind of creates a community for them to gain exposure to the medical field and just preparing for medical school in general, from what college classes you should be taking, volunteering and research opportunities and the importance of them, MCAT advice, networking, all those kinds of things that we might not have that much clarity on at undergrad. So my specific involvement in YPI was through an event called Doctor for a Day. So it's kind of this conference that we put on for these same group of students, high school and college aged, and they have the chance to meet with both current medical students and physicians in the area. And they can just listen to their stories about what their path was like on the road to medical school, their struggles, any advice that they have for future applicants. And we also hosted some really fun activities for them to just get a taste of what it's like to be in the medical field. So I actually helped put on a case session where we broke up these students with clinical year students, M3s and M4s, have a little more knowledge about the medical field, and they got to create a diagnosis, kind of like a house MD type of situation. And what I really loved the most about this event was that, much like myself, I don't come from a medical family. I didn't have that much clarity or instruction to confidently apply to medical school and navigate that road. So I think this conference really provides with a network and support system to help them accomplish those goals that might seem daunting at first glance. So currently I'm working with Noah and the pre-med portal as their digital marketing and outreach coordinator. So it's really important for us to connect you guys with the proper information and resources like these admissions officers you're going to hear from today. And we just hope that their advice and experience will help you feel a little more confident and successfully apply to medical school. So I really hope you enjoy this session and a lot of your questions can be answered today.
Thanks, Christine. Yeah, we've been doing a lot of great work together, and hopefully, we'll keep rocking it.
Yeah.
Okay, well, you have a great rest of your night, and hopefully we'll catch up soon.
Yes, we will.
Okay, so now I want to turn to Abdallah right before we start with our live Q&A. He's going to be helping to select the questions for tonight. So I just want to give him a chance to sort of talk about what that's going to look like.
All right, thank you, Noah. Hey, everybody. My name is Abdallah. I just want to talk about a couple of things. If at any point you have questions for our panelists, please post them in the comment section below. A few pointers about the questions. Please keep them short. The shorter, the better. The program, unfortunately, won't let us post questions that are too long. So keep them concise and no longer than a couple of sentences. If you have more than one question, you're very, very welcome to type all of them. You can ask as many as you like. And lastly, there are usually more questions that we can get to in an hour's time. And we really try to select the questions that the most viewers can benefit from. So consider how you can maybe rephrase a question that is specific to you and make it applicable to other viewers as well. And we'll try to select that. Lastly, we really appreciate your feedback. So we'll be posting a survey at the end of the live stream. So feel free to fill that out. It's very short, maybe like 3 or 4 questions. And we will choose one individual who fills out the survey to receive a set of Frank Netter Anatomy flashcards, which is a great resource for incoming medical students. Noah, back to you.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. And I'm looking forward to some of the questions we get tonight. Okay, so now I'm going to turn to our panel. So first, we have Miss Jenny Crouch. She's the Director of Admissions and Recruitment Operations at the Medical College of Georgia. We also have Dr. David Neumeyer. He is the Dean of Admissions at Tufts University School of Medicine. So thank you so much, you two, for joining us tonight.
Welcome.
Okay, well, the first question I wanted to bring up, and it's because we're sort of in the thrust of this interview season, is regarding interviews. So I want to ask what your typical interview format is for your schools, and then see how your interview format this year is similar or different to that standard. Dr. Neumeyer, we can start with you.
Okay, thank you. So yeah, we've had a lot of changes, and I suspect I will speak specifically about Tufts, but probably in general, most of the medical schools across the country are doing similar things that what we are doing, because we've all had to rearrange life as a response to COVID and make sure that the interview process is accessible to as many students as possible, and also safe, not only for the students, but also for the interviewees, interviewers, and our family at Tufts. So to start with, we're doing 100% virtual interviewing. Our admissions day has been cut shorter, so we have tried to align the interview day a little bit with the time zone issues across the country. So where we typically would start at about somewhere between 9:30 and 10 in the morning, we're starting later, more like 10:45, so that people on the West Coast don't have to get up quite so early. And I apologize for people who are farther away and on a more extreme time zone, but there's only so much we can do. We've also had some of our presentations that were done live in the past, posted online prior to the interview sessions, so that the day is a bit shorter and the applicants can listen to these podcasts prior to interview day, have questions, and then we have a brief amount of time for question and answers during the course of the day. Similarly, we have a student panel, which is done, which in part takes place of our campus tour, although we do have a campus tour that was pre-recorded and allows students to see the campus as best as possible. That can be done virtually. And then we have the interview sessions in the afternoon. We have 2 interviews during the course of the day, either with a faculty member on the admissions committee and a 4th-year student, or 2 faculty members. The interviews have been more or less the same, other than being virtual, although we've allowed a little extra time to accommodate for some technical glitches. 2 other things that we have during the course of our day: at the end of the day, we have a session for underrepresented medicine students, which is a sort of a safe space for them to meet with other students and discuss issues pertaining to being underrepresented at Tufts. And then secondly, a inclusion session for members of who are represented by the LGBTQIA plus community, another session that's involving those students. Otherwise, the content of our interviews is basically the same as it's been in the past.
Okay, so it sounds like you guys are really taking heart to adapting to this virtual formats.
Correct.
Okay, great. Jenny, I'll give you a chance.
Sure. Yeah. So like Dr. Neumeyer, we have had to make some adjustments to our virtual day just out of respect for applicants' time. And we understand that it's difficult sitting in front of a screen for several hours. And so we're starting a little bit later in the day. At MCG, we do a multiple mini interview format. We have not changed from that. So we are doing a virtual multi-mini interview format. And so we do about 8 sessions, 8 different interviews, which are 8 minutes in length. And this is all conducted virtually, but we divide students into 2 groups. So the day starts with an introduction. We get to know our students. One thing that's difficult about virtual interviews is that you miss that person-to-person contact. So we really try and take some time early in the morning to get to know people. We give a presentation on MCG, try and answer any questions that applicants may have. We have a lot of information that we have to present because we have 2 four-year campuses and there are differences in those campuses. So we take that time to really introduce them to our college. And then from there, we send students out. One group does MMIs, the other has time to spend with our tour guides and go through a virtual tour. We have 2 virtual tours that we've recorded. It's not the same, but I think it at least shows the students what life is like on campus and what they can expect. And then we have tour guides who show up every day and they're in there doing the interviews as well. So we try and build in a lot of student contact, a lot of faculty contact throughout the day, but we are still doing the multiple mini interview process. And so students will do that virtually via Zoom.
I think that's really cool the way you guys are still doing the MMI virtually.
Yeah, it's, I think we all had a little bit of worry over the summer, just thinking logistically how it would work, but things have worked out pretty well. And so we were able to maintain the integrity of that process. That's something that was incredibly important to us to make sure that we could still offer the same experience virtually that we could in person. And we've been able to do it. So, I think our students have been happy so far and our interviewers have been happy. So this is something that has made a smooth transition, I would say.
Okay, great.
So I just want to add a quick thing. Sorry to interrupt, but I suspect Jenny is doing this as well, that we're also very aware and considerate of the fact that when students are interviewing on campus in an interview room, the playing field is much more even than when people are interviewing at home. The access to internet, the ability to find a quiet, safe place to do your interviews is maybe fairly significantly different between applicants. So we've made a concerted effort to make sure that applicants have a good place to do their interviews. And we've trained our committee members who do the interviews to make sure that they understand the differences and inequalities that some applicants may have.
Yeah, absolutely. That's something that we addressed early on with our multiple mini interview assessors. They are separate from our admissions committee. So these are blind interviews that students go on, but we did take a lot of time to just go through how different virtual interview that atmosphere is from the in-person content. Because, if you're not used to doing this, I'm used to being on the computer all the time, but if a faculty member is not used to doing this, there's some things you have to get used to. And of course, there are going to be technical challenges with an MMI virtual process, and we've tried our best to accommodate those and to make sure that students get a fair experience. If there are any technical issues, we give them another opportunity. So we've really tried to be mindful of the fact that this is not an in-person situation and that there are going to be hiccups and challenges, and everyone is going to have a different experience. People may be on the internet. There may be a storm in one state where it's not storming in Georgia, but there could be a storm elsewhere. So there's all kinds of situations that come up on a daily basis. But yeah, we just have to be flexible. I think flexibility is the key for this cycle.
Right. And it's everyone's first time going through all this together. So it's going to be a learning curve, but it sounds like you guys are making all the necessary steps and adaptations to do this successfully.
Yeah, the truth is that the applicants, so far, we're still young in the game. We've had 7 interview sessions so far, but the applicants are actually far more adept, far more technically savvy than most of my committee members are. So it's really, the problem is on our shoulders.
I would agree with that. We do breakout rooms for our multiple mini interviews, and I always tell them, like, this is a skill for your CV. If you've never run a breakout room before, this is difficult, but they have it by the end of the day.
Great. Well, I want to get to the next question because we have a lot coming in. So this one has to do with the interview admission timeline and how that might have changed now with COVID. So this one is from, it looks like Tony. And so he says, how have interview admission timelines changed as a result of COVID? Are things being pushed back? Are they starting up earlier? Et cetera. With the MCAT, are we accepting them later? That sort of stuff. So Jenny, I'll start with you this time.
Sure. So we've absolutely, again, we've had to be flexible with applicants understanding the challenges that we're facing, our applicants are facing. So we did extend our MCAT deadline for this year. Luckily, we were able to start interviews on time. So we've been able to maintain that timeline. We have an early decision process that interviews at the end of August. So we were able to start that and maintain. So we haven't adjusted the interview schedule per se, but we have been flexible with students about testing and trying to make sure that we were being fair and giving people ample opportunity to complete the requirements.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I can imagine the applicants appreciate that flexibility too. David, how about at your school?
Yeah, it's I basically will echo what Jenny said, that we have tried to make accommodations for people who have later submissions of both their transcripts, their letters of recommendations, their MCAT scores, knowing that people have had to take their MCATs later. And so we've tried our best to accommodate for people. We get a lot of applicants at Tufts. This year we've had more applicants, almost 1,000 more than last year. So we're in the 14,000 range. So what we've tried to do is review our applicants, and we're still reviewing our applicants and still receiving submitted applications. Make sure we have room later on in the admissions interview cycle for people who submit a little bit later in the process.
Okay, that's great. That's great. Again, echoing that sort of flexibility that we all need to have during this challenging time. So the next question I want to ask about is interview prep. I know a lot of students are probably anxiously awaiting, potential interviews. So my question is, how would you recommend students prepare for interviews, particularly maybe for your institution, maybe based off the format or the style? And Jenny, we started with you last time. So David, we'll start with you.
Sure. I think, there's nothing particularly unique to a medical school interview that you should prepare yourself for than maybe any other interview. I think what's maybe not needs to be said is make sure you get a good night's sleep the night before, and make sure you do your homework. That means making sure you understand what's on your application, read about the activities, make sure you're up to date with the experiences you've had, and make sure you've read about the school and have some prepped questions for the interviewers and other people who you might interact with. It's perfectly okay to write them down and to read them, even ask. I think it's okay to ask different interviewers the same question, because you might get a slightly different perspective on things. I think that will allow you to be more relaxed and be yourself during the interview day, the more prepared you are. I also think it's important to dress professionally, this is not the day to express yourself, so to speak, in a artistic expression or forward expression. It's not that we hold that against people, but medicine is still a relatively conservative field. Some of our people who are doing interviews are older and sort of have expectations of a certain degree of professionalism. And it's a sign of respect to dress professionally during the interview day. And what that means is highly flexible. It doesn't mean you have to wear a suit and a tie. It just means you have to dress clean and professionally as best as you can.
That makes sense. And I can confirm that, going through the hospital and the clinics, attendings definitely do expect you to dress professionally, some sort of attire, whether that's white coats or scrubs, very much still, attire based.
And I would say we tell our admissions committee members, the people who are doing the interviews, the same thing, that they're expected to dress professionally. And it's okay. Some of them are dressed in scrubs. Some of them are coming out of the OR. Some of them are coming directly from COVID units. I mean, there's a whole spectrum of where people are coming from right before the interview. So we have to be respectful of that. But as interviewees, you are may have similar circumstances. You might be coming from work or doing other things, but we still expect or hope that you will dress professionally.
Right. Jenny, how about any specific interview preparation tips regarding MCG, either specifically or in general?
Sure. Yeah. So I get questions a lot about how can I prep for an MMI? I think when you say the word MMI or the abbreviation MMI, people automatically get anxious. And for us, really the multiple mini interview is just a series of conversations. So I know some schools with MMIs, they give you a prompt and they want you to come in and talk for a certain amount of time. But one thing that we wanted to hold on to as we made the transition from traditional interviews into multi-mini interviews is that we really wanted to keep that conversational feel. So we do have prompts. Students are required to read a prompt and discuss that prompt. And those are based on the AAMC's Entering Core Competencies for Medical Students. But really, it's a conversation. It's a conversation between two people about a certain topic. And so we want to have a dialogue. So I say that any prep that you can do, that you would do for a job interview, would be perfectly suitable for an MMI, at least for our institution. Now, each institution may have different rules about their MMIs, but for us, it's really a conversation. You know, our dean talks a lot about, she's a practicing OBGYN. So when she goes in a room, she has a few minutes to build rapport with people and figure out a treatment and a solution and move forward. And that's kind of what the MMI does, is you have a few minutes to come in, build rapport with someone, have a conversation, and make an impact. And so I would encourage people really work on your verbal and nonverbal communication skills. Practice like you would for a job interview, because it's very similar. So I don't want people to get too anxious when I say MMI, because really it is just a series of conversations. And I would echo the professionalism part. So make sure that you use appropriate language in your interviews. I know that's a silly thing to say, but especially on video, you can be casual sometimes, or think that, you know, this is a little more casual because it's virtual. And that's not the case. The interviewers are not casual. So make sure that you use appropriate language, that you know, anything you would do for a job interview, dress professionally. When you dress professionally, you communicate that you care, right? So I would encourage that. And also watch your nonverbal communication, because it may be a little different in virtual interviews than it would in person. So just make sure you're still making good eye contact in that virtual environment. I think those are tips that will help you succeed in our MMI process.
I want to echo something you said about kind of when you say MMIs, people kind of get nervous. But I remember doing an MMI, and I actually thought that was the most fun kind of interview format, because it is just a bunch of little conversations.
Yeah, I think people are surprised. And the first year that we did it, we didn't quite know what to expect from the student reaction, if they were going to still have the same positive feedback that they had with our traditional one-on-one interviews. And they did. They said, you know what, it's not that bad. We actually had a good time, and that was kind of fun. And so for us, it was nice to see. We also give applicants an overview before they go into the MMI to make sure that they know all of the rules, that they're fully prepared for the timing of the MMI, that they don't have to worry about the logistics. We review that before they go into the interview.
Right. That's great. So the next question I want to turn to is about kind of the pitfalls and good performances that you guys have seen with interviews. So this one is from Tony, and says, what are some common virtual interview pitfalls for students you have found? And especially now that you guys have been doing this for, you know, several weeks now. I think, David, we started with you last time. So Jenny, you can go first.
Oh, okay. I will say that one thing that's nice about the MMI is that if you have a bad interview, let that go, because you still have other opportunities to make a great impression. And so if something doesn't go right, if you're not building that rapport with an interviewer, try and let that go. And we've seen that sometimes students will hold on to a negative experience if they think they messed something up or could have said something or should have said something. That influences the rest of their interviews. And so my advice would be, if something doesn't go as planned, if you say something you didn't mean to say, or you didn't say something you intended to say, let that go and focus and be in the moment for the rest of the interviews. And as far as the best things to do in an interview, I would say be humble, but represent yourself well and be authentic. by the time you get to the interview, we know a lot about you. We've read a lot about you, and we're pretty confident in who you are as a medical school applicant to bring you into that interview. So this is just an opportunity for you to tell us more about yourself, to tell us what's not on that page, to tell us things that are authentic to you. And so just really enjoy that experience. Try not to be afraid of it.
Yeah, I really like that. David, how about you? Any pitfalls you've noticed students so far in the virtual interview process?
I would say, in distinguishing a virtual interview from a regular live interview, the biggest pitfalls that we've had are some of the technical limitations that have occurred both on our end and the applicant's end. The other issue that I've noticed is that sometimes applicants are not staring at the screen properly. We see people staring off and getting distracted sometimes. Maintaining as best you can eye contact, looking like you're paying attention to the interview, listening properly, I think is a very important skill set. And that sometimes takes practice because, you might have a camera that is attached to your computer in a different vision line than what the interviewer is seeing. So the interviewer might be seeing you staring off into space, but you're actually just staring at your camera, not at the screen. And so that can complicate matters a little bit. And obviously we've trained our committee members to understand that.
Yeah, I really like that because there's a really easy fix to some of those problems. Like if your camera's too low, just put a book underneath your laptop. Think about lighting. Have a lamp in front of you as your light source that your face lights up, not the background. So kind of highlighting some of those things that can really change the way someone perceives you on a virtual call is, huge.
Yeah, and Noah, I would add, be mindful of your background as well. Be mindful of what is in the background. Just like your picture for your medical school application, you want to keep the same level of decorum. So you want to make it professional, tidy, so that the interviewers don't get distracted by looking. We obviously talk to our interviewers about people are going to have different resources, be able to go different places, but everyone can have a tidy place when they're doing their med school interview.
Yeah, I'm going to say no. I'm distracted by that Green Bay Packers sign in the back.
Whoa. That is a Georgia, wrong side. Georgia.
Georgia. I'm sorry. It looks like Green Bay Packers. Well, exactly. Either way, it's okay. I like the Packers too. And it's a Bulldogs?
It's a Bulldogs, but the Packers beat my Falcons last night, so.
Yeah, I know. I didn't want to bring that up.
It's okay, Noah. The Dogs are looking strong this season. It's going to be a good season for them.
Looking strong. Go Dogs. So the next question I want to turn to has to do with the impact of COVID on academic performance. So this is a question from Paula and says, how would our very low MCAT or academic scores due to an increased work in hours due to COVID being considered? If an applicant was interviewed, would you recommend they address, I guess, maybe a discrepancy or lower scores during their interview? And I lost track of who I started with last time, but I think it's
David's turn. Yeah.
It doesn't matter. No, I don't care. I don't feel slighted at all. But I'm happy to go first. We actually have a question on our secondary application that allows applicants to address this issue, how you're impacted by COVID. And that could be in many different ways. It's not expected to be a long answer, so it's somewhat character limited, but it does give applicants the capacity to express things. And we have also made the decision, we spoke in extensive detail over the past 6 months whether we're going to continue requiring the MCATs or not, whether that was a fair process. And we decided we would keep the MCATs, but to understand the MCATs is just a small section, or maybe not such a small section, but a section of the holistic evaluation process. So we would much rather see strong academic records in your college grades and scores than we would a strong MCAT score. And if you've had issues in terms of taking the MCATs or taking the MCATs again and not having the capacity to study in a normal way, or when you took the MCATs in the exam session, you were rattled because of the circumstances, we take that into complete understanding. It is something you can bring up. I would say that generally speaking, our interviewers would ask those questions. Because if you had, if you were invited to interview with us, then generally speaking, we have made the decision that we think you're academically sound, and that your grades and scores are not going to be a hindrance to getting accepted. But that sort of doesn't always lend true, and sometimes people will have questions about certain academic metrics.
Right, that makes sense. Yeah, if you got the interview, you are competent enough academically, for the next level. Jenny, I'll go to you.
Yeah, my response is very similar. So we also added a section on the secondary application for applicants to tell us just how COVID has affected their preparation. Our MMI process doesn't allow for that as much. And so it's really imperative that students lay that out for us on the secondary application. But it's, as David mentioned, it's a small part of a holistic review. So we're going to look at those metrics. We have to look at metrics. It's a profession where you have to take tests. There are benchmarks that you have to meet along the way. But again, we're also looking at, did someone have to work? Did someone, if someone doesn't have to work, we kind of expect you should have really good grades in the high MCAT. If someone has to work and all those hours are mixed in, we're going to look and see that journey. So everybody's journey is a little bit different. That's why I think that's why we have these discussions, because there's no one formula for getting into medical school. It's really us looking at a holistic applicant and taking in the consideration of their context and their specific journey. And so the more information you can give us on that secondary application is incredibly helpful.
Yeah, I liked something that you both emphasized, and that's the message of, you're not just an MCAT number, you're not just a GPA score. There's a lot more to every applicant than that. While that, certainly might be helpful, you're not just those numbers. Right.
Yeah, I like to say that that the grades and MCAT scores sync in terms of their importance once you become an interviewee. So when you're here at Tufts, and I suspect the same is with at Medical College of Georgia and other medical schools across the country, it's all about who you are as a person and what you represent and what you bring to the table, your communication skills, your activities, your critical thinking skills, all the things that we're sort of looking for that are non-tangible in an applicant that really represent much more importance than just grades and scores.
Yeah, and just to follow up on that, absolutely, because there are people with terrific grades and terrific scores who can't communicate. And so, it really isn't one factor. You can have the highest MCAT, the highest GPA, but if you come into the multiple mini interview and things don't go well, then that's a consideration. So it really is holistic review. And I know students get a little frustrated sometimes when you say that, because what does that mean? What do I have to do to get into med school? But really, once you're in the ballpark of GPAs and metrics and the averages for those institutions, we have people on either side of that. So it really does come down to who you are, what you've done, and what your passion is for medicine.
I imagine if there was a perfect formula that guaranteed acceptance to medical school, it would have been published online and everybody, would have followed it. And, so it really is a lot of factors. I like that. So I want to turn to our next question, and that's about online extracurricular activities. So this one's from Kia. It says, how are your respective schools looking at online shadowing opportunities? Are they being counted as normal shadowing hours? And I would like to extend that also to maybe other online or virtual digital opportunities as well. And Jenny, we can start with you.
Yeah, our admissions committee, they don't live in a bubble. We all know the world that we're living in today. And so we are all incredibly sensitive to the fact that opportunities of in-person shadowing are rare. And so we're looking at those virtual opportunities and counting those into the context of everything that the applicant has done. I think for us, what's really important is at the end of the day, do we as an admissions committee feel that students have a strong understanding of the career that they're going into? And that's what has to come across in that application, whether it's virtual, in person. We want to know that you have an understanding of healthcare and patient care. So that might look different, and service and leadership as well. So for us, the shadowing per se is not, it's not the end all be all. We look at, have you volunteered making care packages for workers, or face care masks? I mean, there's so much that you can do that's outside of that traditional box of in-person shadowing.
I like that. Being creative during times when creativity is necessary. David, how about you? Do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, let me start by saying that the current applicant pool has not been affected as much by the sort of lack of ability to gain clinical experience as future applicant cycles are going to have. So we haven't seen as much. Most of our applicants who are applying now have been involved in the medical community for several years, and have had ample opportunity to gain experiences and exposure to the field of medicine. And so it's not really affecting them as much. Now, on the flip side, if there is an applicant who has not had any exposure to medicine and waited until March of this past year to gain exposure, then unfortunately that's a rough circumstance, and it may have been maybe a bit too late for that person to apply this year. The main focus of gaining clinical exposure, and shadowing may be the sort of litmus test, the initial litmus test for that, is to make sure you really know what you're getting into, as Jenny alluded to earlier. And other clinical exposures should be much more in depth than that. So I actually am not super familiar with the concept of online shadowing. I've heard about it, but I'm not exactly sure how well it works. I have some concerns about it, whether it really represents things. But mainly what happens when people shadow is they say, "Oh, this looks like a profession that I would be interested in doing. I'm going to dig deeper and do something different." Nonetheless, there are still opportunities that are available for people who want to gain clinical experience, like working as a scribe, working as an EMT. It's much harder, though, to get into hospitals, into clinical practices as a volunteer than it used to be.
Right. And actually, one of the panelists on our previous panels kind of had a similar trope in that when it comes just to shadowing, the question is, what are you truly getting out of it in its full sense? I feel like medical schools want to see something that's meaningful and impactful on you. So if that is meaningful and contributes to your application, then fantastic. But if it doesn't, then I personally don't feel like it's the most necessary or important part of an application.
Yeah, and sometimes the problem is that shadowing isn't always equal. So depending on how shadowing is done, sometimes it can be an incredibly passive experience, and sometimes it can be much more involved depending on the people involved with the experience.
Absolutely. That's why we love to see scribes, because that's a little bit more active. One of our admissions committee members says a shadow implies that you stand there and watch. And a scribe, you're in there, you're doing things. But for us, it's really commitment and long-term commitment. We want to see a long-term commitment to something. So no matter what that is, it can be volunteering. It doesn't necessarily have to be in the clinical realm, but we do want to see that you have been committed to something long-term, because medicine is a long-term commitment.
Right. Well, the next question I wanted to bring up to you guys has to do with sort of this dichotomy between primary care and research. And this is something that when I look up medical schools online, there tends to be a focus maybe on one or the other. And I'm sure both your institutions have great primary care education and great research opportunities. But I was wondering if there was one that maybe you wanted to talk more about, or that you felt like your institution excelled in. Maybe there's a program related to one of these two things. But yeah, primary care or research. And David, we can start with you this time.
Sure, I'll take a stab at that one. So let me start by saying that at Tufts, we are not necessarily training you to become a researcher or a primary care physician. It's really very much open-ended. Our goal is really to train you to go out and do whatever you want to do within the field of medicine, or maybe not even within the field of medicine, but most of our graduates stay within the field of medicine. And we just want to make sure that we can prepare you as best as we can to to do what your heart and your brain wants to, where it wants to take you. That could be going into primary care. It could be doing bench research. It could be doing public health. It could be, any of the different specialties in medicine, or even going off to get a master's in business, going into the World Health Organization. There are all sorts of different opportunities that exist there. In addition, we want you to be forward thinkers and to think about how medicine can be better at the next stage of the game. One of the things the COVID pandemic has taught us, similar to the AIDS epidemic back years and years ago, was the sort of strengths as well as the pitfalls in our medical system. And so being involved in a school that sort of gives you the opportunity to think and try to change medicine to make it a better place in the future is another one of our goals. So we're kind of a broad-based institution. It's not just about research. It's not just about training for primary care. It's really much more broad-based than that.
Yeah. I like that because, I don't think that there needs to be a dichotomy, one or the other. You have to go to a school because it's really good at research. You have to go because it's really good in primary care. Well, if that's what you're interested in, that's fantastic. But I like that you're emphasizing that there are a lot of opportunities for people with a lot of different interests. Jenny, how about you? How about MCG?
Yeah, I'm going to echo that. I don't think it's one or the other. And so just to highlight that, we recently had 2 NIH fellows from MCG. So we're quite proud of that. And we also it started our 3+ primary care track. So that just shows you that there's a lot going on within the institution, and you explore over the course of your time with us what you want to be and where you want to go. And I think that we don't focus on one or the other, but we do offer a 3+ primary care track. And with the 3+ primary care, you get a flex 4th year at our Augusta campus. And so what that means is that students can really individualize their training, and they can figure out, do I want to spend that 4th year doing research? Do I want to do advanced residency prep? Do I want to go straight into primary care after 3 years? We're giving students the flexibility to do that now. And in primary care, we're also including OBGYN and general surgery. So, there's a wide breadth for students to discover what they want to do. And I know a lot of times students come in, and when they're applying, they're very focused on, I know I want to do this. So what does this institution have to offer me in that way? But I think that changes, and it should change as you come in and you learn more through your experience in your med school experience. So, I would look for institutions that their mission aligns with yours more than anything. At MCG, our mission is really to improve the health of Georgians. And we do that in a variety of ways, whether it's through research and supporting our students in research. I think about 75% of our students participate in research. So whether it's that focus or providing the 3+ primary care track so students can leave after 3 years and start their primary care journey. There's a lot of different pathways, but our mission is just to improve the health of Georgians. So do look at the missions of the institutions, not only because it will probably come up in your interview as you're traveling around interviewing, but because it's important. One main takeaway for me from this conversation that I hope you have is that we spend a lot of time talking about what students can do to get into med school. And there's a lot of pressure on the students to show all these wonderful things about themselves. But I think as institutions, we also have a responsibility to show students what opportunities exist for them with us so that they can make an informed decision and find the best fit, because you should make the best fit. You should find the best fit for medical school because it's an incredibly difficult process. So you want to be in a place whose mission aligns with yours, whose culture you feel comfortable in. So there's so many considerations, but I would say it doesn't have to be one or the other.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that. It is so important. This is about you, making sure that you go to the place that works best for you, that you get the best education, and you feel motivated and you feel like you're part of the right team. And this is lifelong learning for you, and it's your whole career. It is not about a place on the U.S. News and World Report ranking. This is about your education and taking care of people and advancing the field of medicine. So yeah, I couldn't agree more. I just want to make a quick plug for our main track program because it speaks a little bit differently to what I've mentioned before. Tufts has a main track program that is really sort of a rural medicine, primary care type track, not just primary care, but mostly primary care. And what distinguishes the Maine track from the Boston track is it predominantly looking for people from the state of Maine, but also people who are interested in rural medicine or have close associations with Maine. And we do MMIs up in the Maine track as well as traditional interviews. So if you are applying to the Maine track, be aware of that.
Yeah, I think these are really neat programs because every school has very different and unique opportunities like that. I had never heard of a 3+ sort of year program. I don't know if MCG is the first one to do that, but that was new to me at least. And then that's cool that with Maine that you guys have something worked out with them. Lots of really neat opportunities. Yeah. So the next question I want to ask you guys has to do with undergrad research. And I remember being an undergrad, and this was a very stress-inducing topic for me. So this one's from Sundip, and it says, what do you look for in terms of an undergrad research position? How important is it to be involved in research? So I'll let you guys choose this time who wants to go first. I don't like
Go ahead, Jenny.
Okay, mine will be easy. Mine will be quick and easy. So I can tell you that, a lot of our students come to us without having research experience. It is not a requirement for admission. When we see a student who has research, we do think that shows a certain level of scientific inquiry, which is attractive to us, but we don't require it. And I think that we find a lot of pleasure in exposing students to research and showing them what they can do along the way. We have a medical scholars program where students can pick a research topic and embark on that with faculty support. So you don't have to have that to come in. It's not a requirement for us. You would never get denied admission because you didn't have research experience. If anything, it's just sort of the cherry on the sundae, I would say.
Yeah, David?
Yeah, so I'm going to expand a little bit on what Jenny said because I agree with it. Research is not a requirement. If it were, we'd put it down in our admissions requirement. What we really want, which I alluded to earlier, was that we want people who can think about ways to make medicine better. And that's sometimes a test to research, but not always. And when you are getting experience in research as an undergrad, which is not a requirement, but I think it's a nice thing to do because most undergrad schools are in research type environments, and you really can take advantage of sort of learning about things in a different way than you would in a classroom. So I'd highly recommend being involved with research. But the research doesn't have to be bench research. It doesn't have to be pipetting. It doesn't have to be intimidating. We've had people who do music literature research or history research or political science research. It's about understanding the research process so that when you are making decisions, sometimes very important decisions on your patients, you have an understanding of how papers are published and how research is done, so you can be a better critic of that research. And it is an incredibly invaluable tool. We also understand that research does not begin and end as an undergrad. It can continue through medical school. It can continue during your residency and your fellowship and your career. So don't feel like you have to do research as an undergrad, particularly if that's not your thing. Or if you have done research and it doesn't feel like the right fit for you, that's totally okay. You can do other things.
Yeah, I just want to echo that because I remember people were kind of plugging in my ear. If you don't have like 1 to 2 papers published by the end of your senior year, like there's no way you're getting into medical school. And I just don't think that could be any more like false. If research is what really drives you and motivates you and interests you, by all means, that's fantastic. But for me, basic science as bench research was not my cup of tea. And yeah, I encourage you to pursue things that you are really interested in.
Let me just change my tune slightly. If you're thinking of applying as an MD PhD applicant, that is different, and then you are expected to have significant research experiences and likely be involved in publications. But as a regular MD applicant, it's very different.
Yeah, and as David, you pointed out that we want people to be good consumers of research, which is some of the point. And that's one of the reasons we add statistics. We add statistics as a prerequisite for our students. There's a little bemoaning over that, but that is why we added it, because you will be looking at research for the rest of your career and trying to make determinations based on research. And so you have to have at least an understanding of the basic concepts of research.
Yeah. That class will come in handy at medical school.
I thought it might.
I can vouch for that. So the next question I wanted to ask you guys was about students who are currently gap year students. So this one's from Kia. It says, do you have any advice for gap year students who are struggling to find clinical experiences due to COVID restrictions? And I want to extend that not necessarily just to clinical experiences, but maybe whatever they had lined up or organization they were passionate involved in has slowed down. What advice would you give to them in terms of what to build onto their CV or resume as they consider applying to medical school? David, we can start with you.
Yeah, so, honestly, we haven't had that much experience yet with those types of students, because most of the students who are applying this year have explained to us on their application what they're doing this current year, and that does change. It's always been the case where it's changed, but most of the time we're not evaluating applicants so much on what they're doing currently during the application cycle, as long as they're just not sitting at home doing nothing. It's probably going to be more of an issue for people who are going to apply next year or the following year. And again, it's similar to what we've spoken of previously. We have a complete understanding that this is a challenging time to gain experiences and do things. There are things that are available, but it's much harder to get to do things, and it's much more limited. So if the only thing you can do is get a job and make some money, or if you're at home taking care of your family, or doing things, we understand that, and you just only can do the best that you can do, and hopefully things will change and will improve as months proceed.
Yeah, I really like that. It's important for students to sort of realize that everyone's going through this and learning through this together. Jenny, how about you?
No, I think David said that perfectly. I'm not sure I could add much more to that response, other than to just say, try and show resilience during this time as much as you can, and try and do something to further your application to medical school. I think we're all going to be very understanding in the next year coming up that the opportunities are not as plentiful as they have been in the past, but be creative and show us that you're doing something with that time other than just studying for the MCAT, which is also a good thing to do.
Right. Well, guys, believe it or not, we are almost at an hour, but I wanted to ask one more question, because this one was something that really caught my attention. I was interested in this. And this has to do with the potential upcoming year. So this is from Emily. Do you have an idea of how the 2021-2022 application cycle might look like? Will it look similar to this year's, or is it too soon to tell? Whoever wants to take a stab at that.
Gosh,
well, I think
go
ahead.
No, David, go ahead. Because
I was going to say that you guys in Georgia are closer to the CDC than we are. So maybe you have better insight. Maybe the knowledge is, going to diffuse to you guys quicker than to us. It's hard to say. I mean, I can give you my hope is that we will have a vaccine at some point. I should probably mention I am a pulmonologist, so I've been in the thick of things, and a critical care specialist at a hospital. So I practice, and I continue to practice medicine. My hope is that within the next few months, there'll be a vaccine that's available, and that should be a game changer once the vaccine can be well distributed amongst people around the country and the world.
Yeah, Jenny, how about you?
As part of the admissions community, we've done a lot of contingency planning this year, and we've put it into effect. Our hope is that we can put that away and not have to use it again, and we can return to in-person interviewing and to a normal timeline and normal conditions. I think it's in some ways been very beneficial because now we know that we can do virtual interviews. And so for some students that's opened up a more global application experience. Some who don't have the resources can now experience lots of different interviews across the country. And so I think in some ways it's been very beneficial, and we will continue to take the lessons that we've learned from this experience and apply them in the future cycle. But as for what that cycle may look like, my crystal ball is not working quite yet.
I was going to ask who had the crystal ball, who has predicted the future now. And then Dr. Newmeyer, I can only imagine that pulmonary and critical care right now has been, challenging. So thank you, by the way, for all that you have done during this crisis.
Well, thanks. I actually am so proud to be part of the medical community. And I don't just mean physicians. I mean all people involved, nurses, physician's assistants, nurse practitioners, respiratory therapists. I mean, the spectrum of all the people who have risen to the occasion to do what we all do. And that also is a testament to all of you out there who are applying to medical school. It is truly remarkable. I just can't be proud enough for all of you to still want to go into medicine during this very challenging time. And it's wonderful. So thank you, and keep it up.
Well, guys, thank you both so much for being on tonight. Jenny, David, we really appreciate both of you participating and attending tonight. I want to bring back on Abdallah. He has been fantastic in helping coordinate and run everything in the background. The questions were phenomenal from the audience. I also want to thank Dr. Haval Kelly, who gave us the streaming platform. Another special thanks to Daniel Kaganov, a second year at Wake with me, who made our videos. To all of our viewers, share this with your peers and your friends. We hope that you enjoyed some of the advice and words that were shared tonight, and we know your peers will too. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, our website, all the digital social media, just so that you can see more of what we'll be putting out in the future and some of our past content. And with that, I just want to say thank you to everyone and good night to our audience.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.